Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Louise Braun Frank. Louise, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. So Louise Braun Frank's children, Joshua and Leah, were both diagnosed with a rare progressive terminal disease. Over the course of their short lives, they lost their abilities to walk, see, and manage their personal care. Louise founded the Joy Thru Tears Foundation in 2021. Joy Thru Tears is passionate about honoring the love, dedication, and tireless commitment caregivers provide to whomever they assist. Its mission is to offer a gift of self-care that will refresh, renew, and rejuvenate their mind, body, and spirit. Louise is also the author of the book titled The Gift of Great Sorrow, A Journey Through Pain to Purpose. Louise, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So before we get going here, share with our listeners where you are from originally and where you are now.
So originally I'm from Canada, from Ottawa. I was born in Ottawa, Canada. My father was military, so we moved all over Canada, and in Europe we lived in France for 5 years. So originally from Canada, a French-Canadian family.
Okay.
And yeah.
And you're still there?
So I'm living in Seattle now.
Oh,
So I
cool.
went
Okay.
from Ottawa, I moved all over and then moved to the Northwest Territories for several years and back down to Vancouver and ended up in Seattle.
Okay. Look, this topic is so devastating. You know, when I read about you, and I mean, it's tragic. So first of all, thank you for coming on and willing to share what happened. But you know, in the title, the kind of, what do you call it, the subtitle in a sense of your book, A Journey Through Pain to Purpose, that says a lot. What happened?
Well, my children were diagnosed at 6, as you said, with Friedreich's ataxia, a progressive terminal disease similar to ALS.
So both of them.
So both of them, they're 18 months apart in age, and they were diagnosed a year apart from each other. And both experiences were very different. I found myself wondering what the dreams and hopes I had had for my beautiful family were shattered all of a sudden. So I found myself, instead of asking why, because that's a very common question, I just never felt satisfied when I would say, why my kids, why me? There was just no answer that could have been good enough. And I began reframing my thinking to how am I going to be a great mother to my children and give them what they need to have the best life they could have? How am I going to guide them to finding purpose in their life and to realizing why they were here and what what they could do to make a difference in the universe, in the world.
How long ago was this,
final,
Louise? Sorry. How long ago was this?
Well, this was almost immediately after their diagnosis. Joshua was diagnosed at 6. He would be 35 right now.
Okay.
Actually 37, I'm sorry. And Leah would be 35 right now. So I am a 35-year-old facing the how questions. How am I going to help them? How am I going to be the mother they would need? And then finally, how am I going to survive when they're no longer with me? So that's how it all started with, okay, we're moving forward. I'm reframing our entire life from the expectations of my children are going to grow older and have careers and get married and grandchildren and all these dreams we have as young parents, to this is not likely going to happen for me. So how am I going to reframe our life? So I purposed from the very beginning to find ways for them to, I never wanted them to have a chip on their shoulder, like I'm disabled, poor me. And it never did happen because we did so many activities. We gave back every opportunity that we had throughout their lives. I got them involved in sports, and Leah was in dance. Joshua loved baseball. I encouraged him to keep dreaming. Dream big, he wanted to be a Michael Jordan. As he's barely, he's wobbling around. And I just thought, you know what? Keep dreaming, son.
So All right. Let me, first of all, that is incredible. I mean, I think for me, I believe that is incredible to have that attitude. How do you get there though? I mean,
So
you're
good.
given this diagnosis. I mean, do you automatically walk out the door and go, all right? I mean, most people wouldn't. How did you, so yeah, share with that.
That's a really good question that I've asked myself since many years. And I think the first answer to that is that I have always had a fairly positive outlook on life. I've always been an optimist. I sometimes have been accused of seeing life through my rose-colored glasses, but it's the world that I choose to live in. It
Mm.
isn't that I don't realize the realities that are out there. So being positive and optimistic was very helpful. The other part of it is when I look back, and it really happened more, I realized more when I was writing my book, looking back at my childhood and some of the very difficult experiences that I'd had in my youth really built confidence. At the time, I thought, oh, this is the worst and it's terrible that this is happening. But I also realized that most of these experiences are really designed to give us courage and strength and confidence. And I think that I just pulled from all of that when the time came that I had to face the reality of this debilitating disease that my children had.
What are some of the experiences you're talking about when you were growing up?
So in the beginning of my book, you'll read that loss comes in many colors, and one of the areas that loss can come in, or does come in, is innocence. And so there was some sexual abuse that I described in the early parts that were, of course, devastating, but really that formed a certain idea that I had about the world and about myself and about men and all this sort of thing. That would be probably one of the early memories. The other was that in my family, there were six of us, six children. And I always somehow felt like I was kind of in the middle. I was number four of six. And I felt quite insignificant. All the things that I excelled at were not things that were recognized in my youth.
Mhm.
So I still had to keep going because I'm driven by purposefulness and by meaningful interaction with people. Those two things have driven me my entire life. So I'm still driven at a young age to excel and to succeed at whatever it is that I was interested in.
When you first learned of this diagnosis, you said your kids were six. Did you seek any help or support or yeah?
Yeah, great question. So Joshua started showing symptoms at 3, and Leah probably as well at 3, but I didn't recognize them. I thought she was mimicking her brother. Get the attention because everyone's attention was on Joshua. And so at 3 years old, he started to show symptoms. At 4, we started having him tested. And of course, he was misdiagnosed several times with allergy issues or possibly like MS, just a lot of different diagnoses until finally at 6.5 at Children's Hospital, he was diagnosed with Friedreich's ataxia. um, Leah was much easier because there was a lot of testing that went into Joshua's. There was no blood work or genetic testing that could have been done at that time. Eventually, and now there is, but back at that time there wasn't. So the support that initially, I'll tell you one of the errors I made in the very beginning with my son, and that is initially I felt completely alone in this. And it's such a rare illness, disease, that I thought I was alone. Nobody would possibly understand what this was like. And I pulled away from everyone and everything, including my husband at that time, and just said, I'm going to keep my kids safe and keep myself safe. And I took control. So that was the first thing that I did. And very quickly, certainly after Leah's diagnosis, I realized I needed to have a village around me because this was way too much as things were progressing. So yeah, what I did was I joined the support group for the National Ataxia Foundation. We went to some of their conferences. The first one was very difficult to watch children in wheelchairs already, and mine were still walking. Then I decided, the only way that I'm going to feel purposeful in this, because there's nothing that we could do for the illness itself other than treat symptoms. I started a chapter here in Seattle for the National Ataxia Foundation, where there were many people, many families dealing with this. So that was one of the things that I did, was just starting a support group for other people that were dealing with the same issues.
What are briefly, what does a symptom profile look like?
So with Friedreich's ataxia, it affects all of it's neurological disease. So it affects first the legs, the walking, the balance and coordination. Ataxia means lack of balance and coordination. You'll also often see people that are drunk or alcoholics that will have this staggering walk, and that is the first symptom. There's also a nystagmus in the eyes, so they don't track. They actually have a rhythm that they use when they're reading and that sort of thing. All of the gross motor skills first are affected. So feeding yourself, dressing, their hearing, their sight. Eventually, both of my children lost their sight. 50% of the kids with FA, and it is a childhood onset, typically childhood onset disease. By the time they were late teens, they basically lost their sight. Their hearing is always compromised, sounding like echoes in a room when there's more than one person in a room, very difficult for them to hear. And then just things like swallowing. So any muscle coordination, so swallowing. The final diagnosis came with their heart biopsies, which determined they had a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, and they have no reflexes in their legs or joints or, their knees and all that sort of thing. So Leah became diabetic at the age of 13 on her birthday. And so all of these are possible to get one or all of them, but yeah.
At what point did you share this information with them?
That's a really good question, because how do you tell a 6-year-old that they're going to die young? You can't. Number one, they can't even understand it. And I somehow intuitively knew how to communicate with my children. So when Joshua was diagnosed, I took him alone. My husband, his father, and I sat him down, and I just said, Joshua, you know that you haven't been feeling well. You're very tired all the time, and you seem to fall a lot and hurt yourself. And the reason is that your heart is pumping really hard, and that's why you feel tired all the time. And also your legs and your muscles aren't growing the way they're supposed to. And that's why you seem to trip and fall easily. And I said, but you know what? We're going to still play baseball. We're going to still play basketball. And I just encouraged him to keep dreaming.
And was there a time when you said this was a terminal illness?
There was never a time that I said that. But I will tell you a story.
And I don't say that with any judgment at all.
I totally don't.
I'm not
No, I
I'm just
understand.
curious.
Absolutely. It's a good question. The understanding as they got older was there. But I will tell you a wonderful story of my son, Joshua, and his friend in the back seat of the car. And I'm driving them somewhere. And Joshua said to me up front, Mom, Jacob said that I'm going to die. Is that true? And he was 8 years old, maybe 8 at that time. And it took me by surprise, and I was a lump in my throat. And then I said, Joshua, everyone is going to die. We don't know how, we don't know when, but we're all going to die. So the most important thing is to live, and to live the best life we can, and to be the best person that we can, because we don't know when that day will come.
Man, this is so sad. For me, it's sad, but I'm looking
at an incredible journey for me.
But I'm looking at you, Louise, and you are so friggin' inspiring. Seriously, to be this person that you are, and to work with your kids, to live with your kids the way you did. I mean,
they were my inspiration. I mean, our children really are. I think initially when they're young, they look to us and model a lot of our behaviors. And I can tell you, after they passed away, I look at them, I look at the courage that they lived with every day. I look at the compassion they
Mm.
had for others, less able-bodied than they were, the kindness they shared, and I can't help but be a reflection of what they brought to my life. That's
As you,
how I honor them.
as you were moving through this, um, I'm guessing you shared this with your friends and family to a certain degree. Were there things that didn't help that people said, or and things that did on the other side of that?
I learned to have a lot of grace and to look at the spirit behind what was being said. Some of the things that I absolutely reacted to internally was when people would say, God doesn't give you more than you could handle, or you're strong enough for this. My own parents said, you're strong enough for this, you can handle it. And I just thought, I don't handle this. What are you talking about?
Right.
It was pat answers never heal, they never satisfy. But I did recognize that the intent behind it was people don't know what to say.
Right.
So I did help educate them. And I would say, you know, what's most helpful to me is don't ask, what can I do to help? How can I help you? Do something, and I'm sure it's going to be the right thing. So I had friends come over and help me sew and do a project that just to start and finish something in the beginning was a huge success for me. And I had another friend come and say, let me help you do a garden in the front. And so all these kinds of things, instead of me thinking, what do I need? I have no
Mm-hmm.
idea. I'm lost.
Mm-hmm. So at some point you started the foundation, Joy Thru Tears Foundation. How did it come about?
Well, after my children passed away, and Joshua was 23 and Leah was 25 years old. And after they passed away, I needed to find a way to honor their memory. I realized that being stuck in the grief was not honoring to them. I needed to continue living my life. So the first thing I did was I reframed my life, and I reimagined my hopes and dreams for myself. All these years, 25 years, I had been imagining their hopes and dreams and finding a way to help them find purpose. I found myself asking, who am I without them now?
Mm-hmm.
So I reframed my hopes and dreams. I began looking for ways to honor them. And the first thing was to find a way to give back. And so giving back for me became a part of volunteering, and I'm a strong proponent for volunteerism. So I started volunteering for Make-A-Wish. My kids had both received wishes. My daughter had received a service dog through the Summit Assistance Dog Program in Anacortes, Washington. I started to speak for them and volunteer for them, speak at their fundraising events, which were incredibly successful. Passion, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then volunteered at the food bank, which I had to take advantage of at different times in my life with my kids after divorce. So that was one of the big beginnings for me. And the other thing that I started to do was, well, when my son passed away, I took his ashes to Israel. He'd been to Israel 3 years before he passed. He's blind, in a wheelchair. He can't feed himself. He can't do anything for himself, and sent him to Israel with someone, and hired a tour guide. And he was there for 3 weeks. He was a very spiritual young man, and it was the journey of his life.
Mm.
And before he passed, he said, Mom, I would love to go back there with you. And I said, I'll take you. I
Mm-hmm.
took his ashes, hired this same guide, and walked a pilgrimage to honor my son, and had actually an experience where I heard his laughter while I'm laying in the Dead Sea. It still gives me chills because I physically heard him, and I knew that he was well. And for my daughter Leah, after she passed, we had watched a movie called The Way, the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And she said, Mom, even in my wheelchair, I'd love to do that with you. And I said, Leah, I'll bring you with me. So
Yes.
that's what I did at pilgrimage to honor her memory.
Oh my gosh.
I did 3 Caminos, actually. The first was for her. I brought her ashes and left them on altars along the way. And it was the most amazing opportunity for me to grieve without caring for people at home. I was alone. I was meeting other people with other stories, and we were interacting, and it was such a community of healing
Wow.
with us.
Wow.
So the next one I went was for myself, to celebrate my life and to learn to live in the present instead of being anxious about what's to come. So these are some of the things. I planted a garden for my daughter with her ashes in it in the front, and all my friends brought things to add to the garden. And every year on her birthday, April 10th, we put the garden back together in honor of Leah. So the foundation came about last year because as I began writing the book, I realized that, there was still an area that I hadn't touched, and that was the caregivers.
Mhm.
I can't tell you of all the people that have helped us, the practical, the hands-on people that affected and impacted my family the most were the caregivers that eventually we had to hire to help care for Joshua and Leah. They gave me respite when I needed it. I could be a mom sometimes without being nurse and caregiver.
Mhm.
And they were people, young people that for me, when I hired them, I said, the most important thing for me is that you socialize my children, that you keep them involved in the community. And that's exactly what they did. So Joy Thru Tears Foundation came about as a way for me to give back to caregivers who highly impacted our life. So we're in our pilot year. We actually officially started on January 2021. So I've been writing the book, not focused on the foundation too much yet, but we are in our pilot year. We are in the process of creating protocols and getting volunteers and getting financial backing, which we desperately need because you can't do something like this. And we're going to provide for caregivers what Make-A-Wish does for Wish kids. Um,
So break it down. So it's for caregivers.
So it's for caregivers only.
Okay.
And that means, and we're just establishing the protocols, but we're partnering with Make-A-Wish. I've met with the
Oh
CEOs of
wow.
Make-A-Wish, Sarah, and the Summit Dogs. They know who has caregivers, and they're going to refer nominees to us so that we can then review the nominations, select caregivers, and then we'll offer a gift, some kind of a nourishing experience. It could be they can't get away overnight. It could be just a full spa, nice dinner treatment. It could be a weekend getaway. We won't be doing like flights, or we won't be handling a lot of those kinds of details,
Mhm.
but we want to be able to honor the work, the tireless commitment that they give.
Jesus, that's amazing. That's so awesome.
I am so passionate about this. I can't even tell you how much I am excited to bring people on board. We have an incredibly strong board of directors, lawyers, doctors. We have people that are passionate about this as much as I am. And again, the financial backing, I keep saying we need a patron, we need someone who's going to, but I'm really excited and I'm fully confident that this is going to move forward and be something big because it's a niche that really isn't touched.
So again, it's the Joy Thru Tears Foundation.
Exactly.
Okay.
Joy
And
Thru
I'll
Tears Foundation. The book can be ordered through that as well. You just order book, click here, and there's lots of reviews. I've had amazing reviews from yes, independent book reviewers. It's just really doing well, and I'm so pleased.
the book is called The Gift of Great Sorrow, A Journey Through Pain to Purpose. What was the impetus for writing the book? What did you want to say? Who's it for?
It is for anyone who has experienced loss, trauma,
So human
is in the
beings.
midst of grief. I don't know anyone who hasn't at some point. It's certainly at this age in life. Um, I start the book off with saying loss comes in many colors, and it could be the loss of a parent or watching a grandparent or parent as they digress, loss of an ability. Maybe someone's lost their vision, or a vet who has been in the military and lost a limb. This book can be relatable to anyone who has experienced any kind of loss, the loss of a pet. And then I talk about the loss of innocence, anything that's near and dear to our heart. And I feel that this book could be very inspirational and have some real practical tips
Mhm.
on what kinds of things helped me through the loss, and maybe spark something in their minds on how to move through their grief and loss. So it
You
really, the purpose of the book, other than to honor my children, is to inspire healing in others.
you talked a lot about how you were able to uh, find purpose and seek purpose. I mean, I'm thinking to myself as I'm listening to you, I'm both so inspired by what you're saying and a little bit in awe of what you've done. And I'm also wondering, I'm thinking to myself, how friggin' hard it would be. Were there moments where you're like, how the hell am I going to do this?
So many, I can't even tell you. So many moments where I just wondered. In fact, 6 months before Leah passed away, I remember telling my best friend Marie, I don't know how long I can keep doing this. This is hard, because I never wanted to. It's not that I wasn't real with my kids. When things were tough, I would say, things are tough. And when they would cry and they would be angry, Joshua went through some high school years where he was so angry about his disease, and he reached towards alcohol and drugs, and, just angry. And I said, I don't blame you for being angry. I would be angry. We are all angry about this, but it doesn't change it, not going to fix it. And all it does is push people away from you, Joshua. You are a social animal like I am, an extrovert. If you want your friends around you, you're going to have to change your attitude and the way you're choosing to live. I took him to counseling. I went to counseling, certainly through my divorce, which was incredibly traumatic for me, almost nearly as traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
It was very traumatic. And through counseling, I got the support that I needed. Again, asking my friends, surround me, be with me, lift my hands up when I can't lift them up myself. And so I found asking instead of trying to be on my own,
Mm-hmm.
helped a lot. But yeah, there were many times, there still are. Today, I still find I have to make the choice. Some days I get up and I get dressed and I think, yes, that was a good day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I really learned not to judge people in how they are grieving and how long it takes.
Right.
I've learned that grief comes, and it comes in waves, and it can ebb and flow. And we all have different ways of expressing it. And the challenge I think that I have for other people is that if you feel stuck in your grief, just take one step.
Mm-hmm.
I am no better or worse than anyone else. I look at, street people, and I look at them and I think something took them down.
Right.
What was it? They didn't grow up thinking this is who they wanted to be. Anything could take us down. We're an inch away from it.
Right.
So I
It's
stay
true.
very present with that. I stay very present with that, and really endeavor to embody the words that my father gave me when my daughter, the second child, was diagnosed. I'm going to get emotional because my dad's passed away. I've had my dad, my mom, I've had 7 losses directly in 7 years consecutively during my children's loss, from my dad and my sister and my best friend and my mother and my 2 children and my mother. And anyway, just know I've had a lot of loss in my life. And something my dad told me in the very beginning, he said, Lulu, watch them live, don't watch them die. And those words have carried me, and I choose to embody those words for my life as much as I did for my kids every single day.
Man, I think that's the best way to, or a great way to stop right now. And Louise, I've got to have you back because there's so much more I think we can talk about. And the way you're living is so inspiring, and it's a gift. I believe. I'm so glad that you came on this podcast.
Thank you. I would say the greatest gift, and I'm going to give you this as a last thought. The greatest gift, which my book is entitled The Gift of Great Sorrow. What is the greatest gift? Perspective. perspective on life, on my life, on the world around me. It's perspective on walking every day with purpose, intentionally. And I think that that's probably the greatest gift that my children have given me, perspective.
And when you say more about perspective, what do you mean by that?
Well, perspective for me is learning to be present.
Mm,
It's the perspective that my life is a drop in the bucket, but with the ripple effect can affect so many around me. So how do I want that to look? What when I'm gone, what do I want people to remember about me? That's a perspective. Um, how can I affect change in the world? In my world, just around me, and then how does that affect others? So perspective, life, living fully. I bungee jumped in Africa. I travel when I can. I wrote my book, and these were all things that were important and are important to me. So I think perspective is the greatest gift that my children gave me.
awesome. Louise, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
They can reach me on the foundation, Joy Thru Tears Foundation, or at Louise.Frank at Joy Thru Tears Foundation.
Awesome.
Those are probably the best ways.
Okay.
I'm available to speak. I'd love to share inspirational thoughts and speaking at any events. Always looking forward to sharing my experience and sharing my children's experience.
All right. Louise, we'll be in touch. Love to have you back. Thank you so much.
Want the book that I want to recommend?
Oh, yes, of course. I'm sorry.
I'm so excited about this.
Your go-to
I'm not
book
letting you off the
recommendation.
hook,
Sorry about
Guy.
that. Go ahead.
I'm going to recommend this book. You can edit all the other stuff out. I'm recommending this book, and it's a book that is incredibly inspiring, especially because I love the Camino de Santiago and how much healing it gave to me as I was giving to others. And this book is called I'll Push You. It's written by Patrick Gray and Justin Skisuk. And this book, I don't know if you can see it, I'll Push You. This book is a story about a young man who discovered later in life he had a progressive disease that he ended up in a wheelchair, very similar to my children, unable to care for himself. And he told his friend of his dream. He said, I want to walk on the Camino de Santiago. And this was, for me, it was a 35-day walk, 500 miles, up very difficult terrain, up mountains and through rivers and valleys and blah, blah. It was very challenging. And he said, I want to do the Camino de Santiago. It became a very spiritual journey for him, and his friend pushed him the entire journey. And there's a documentary. And I highly recommend, if you are looking for inspiration, this book and this documentary, I'll Push You, is incredible. I related and cried the whole way through.
We'll have that linked up at the show notes page here at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Awesome. I'll push you. That's awesome. All right, Louise, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kai. Oh,
all right.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.